Are you ready for an open discussion with the best of the best and the best of what's next? Welcome to the Tony DUrso Show. Join in on a great conversation today with some of the world's great influencers as they showcase great advice and techniques that made them the game changers they are today. Now, here's Tony DUrso.
Welcome. Thanks for hanging out with us. Today we're chatting with someone at the top of their category, an elite entrepreneur. We're going to talk about old rules to break with Mark Samuel. Now, I'm certain that you, yes you, listening to this right now, you're involved in a product or a service in some way. And here's my ESP at work. You work with others, don't you? I know, I'm right so far, right? It's nearly impossible to have a very sustainable business making good income and doing everything 100% by yourself. What does that mean? That means we have a team. Even if you hire out on a project basis, you have a team. You depend on people. Everyone you know in the world, everyone that's famous, any celebrity of any size or stature, they depend on people. They have a team. And you need people to do their part for you to have success with your vision. So now I ask you this question. What would happen if at whatever level you're at, that your projects complete 25% faster? I want you to think about that for a second. And while you're thinking about that, this episode is all about helping you and your friends turn your vision into reality. We want to help you get very successful at growing your business to a high sustainable level. So wherever you are on that rung on the ladder, whether it's 5, 6, 7, 8 digits or more, you want to go to the next level, I presume, or even just hold steady and sustain where you are now. So meet Mark Samuel. He's a transformational leader, if I said that right, with over 30 years of experience in the business world. And he's going to take us into a deep dive into our teams. He's going to help us all out. And his best-selling book, by the way, is titled Reimagine Teams, the missing piece in team building to achieve breakthrough results. Let's get into it. Hi, Mark. Welcome to the Tony DUrso Show.
Thanks so much, Tony. I really appreciate your introduction and how you describe the importance of teams to every organization, regardless of size. Totally critical.
Yes, it is. When you think about it, even while I was reading that off and thinking about, different people that need help, I was thinking of myself at 5 years old delivering newspapers. And you could say, hey, I did that all myself. But there was still a team involved. Who made that newspaper? Who printed it? Who made it available for me to pick up? Even though I was an entrepreneur, I depended on people. I know it's probably a little silly, but I cannot really think of somebody who can do everything by themselves. Really?
And if you use the bicycle, who made the bicycle in a way that you could trust that it was going to work well for your deliveries?
Yeah, it was hard to have, at the time of my newspaper, at one point in the height of my career, if I want to say it, I had 4 routes. And the only reason I could have 4 routes, that's 4 huge neighborhoods, was because of a bike. Otherwise, forget about it. All right. Mark, we're all looking forward to learning about old rules to break and what that even means. But let's just kind of go back a bit and let's just start from, how did it all start for you?
Well, to me, it's always been about teams. I grew up with teams. So I grew up playing baseball. I grew up playing basketball, football. Everything was about a team sport. And then I got involved with music, and then I became part of bands and orchestras and those kinds of things. And that's a team. And for me, that became my foundation for always wanting to be part of a group that produced a result that that you could measure the result and come out winning or losing, but learning from the losses. And to me, it was all about the camaraderie of the teams, but also the refinement of how we executed, whether in a band, playing in a studio, or whether on a baseball field, really trying to, get the smoothest, fastest play going. It was always about execution, camaraderie to make that happen. And I just love that environment. So when I got, my master's degree in business, the area that I wanted to focus on was organization development and primarily team building, which I ended up having a great mentor at the University of California, Irvine. And boy, that to me just rocked, being able to work with teams and helping them to become more effective and achieve their goals. That to me is a thrill. So I've done it ever since, although I have to say my thinking about teams has changed quite a bit over the years from what I learned in graduate school to what I'm now doing in organizations to get breakthrough results in rapid time.
All right, and I'm getting this. And one question that comes up is, okay, you've worked with teams. You could have done anything in the world. You're working on teams. Is there a point where in your career, your history, you go, I want to focus on this. I want to help people with their teams. This is a business. I can really go somewhere. Let's go and talk about that vision and how that then evolved.
Yeah, I think it was actually fairly early on, because what I was seeing in organizations that was to me so disturbing was what I refer to as the silo impact in organizations, silo thinking, silo behavior, where every functional area is out to be the best functional area, but no one's thinking of the impact on the organization and the impact on other functional areas. So for me, it was so disturbing, because I know that from my previous days in sports and music, we can never function as silos. Can you imagine? I played drums. Can you imagine me thinking as a silo, not considering the impact on the guitars and the bass and the piano and keyboards and such like that? It just didn't make any sense. And same with baseball. It didn't matter what position we played. We're always thinking about the impact on each other. But in organizations, many times you literally had no communication or contact with other functional areas before you were doing things that affected them. So you weren't solving problems together, you weren't making decisions together. And to me, it just created such a blame game environment that any breakdown that occurred, you're blaming the other functional area, you're blaming a teammate, or you're blaming upper management, or you're blaming, the associates in your organization. And that blame game for me is so disturbing. And there was never a point where I played on any kind of a top performing sports team or music group, which I was fortunate to be on at different times, where we could ever have survived in a blame game environment. It's totally the opposite of a learning and growing and getting better environment. In fact, the way I look at it is, I actually think of many organizations as operating as amateurs rather than professionals, because you would never do that on a professional sports group or a professional music group. What you really need to do is say, are we coming together for one purpose, and we're all going to help each other to achieve that purpose together? That to me is where organizations need to go, and what's exciting about being part of a team. Like, you've got a natural support system.
Mark, you're going to have to educate me a little bit on this, and perhaps maybe some in the audience. I have not been in corporate America for, I would think, almost a couple decades by now. As an entrepreneur, we think differently, but you keep talking about, and you've explained it as well, you keep talking about people making themselves the silo effect or environment where they operate on their own. And it's been a long time. Is that a norm out there these days that you're seeing in the workaday world? People just want to do their own thing, punch in, talk to nobody, and punch out at the end of the day? That sort of a thing, to just leave them alone? Because it's like, how can you work? How could anybody pay somebody like that? And so I actually would like a little short education on that, what's going on, and maybe us entrepreneurs can take a look at our own team and see if that's happening.
Well, I think there's two parts to that in terms of how it gets introduced. And let's be clear, not every organization is the same, and not every organization needs to have teamwork in the same way. Let me give you an example. As an entrepreneur, where you're really small, you depend on heroes. who are going to lead their area and create a huge impact without having lots of resources, because you're small, you're trying to get started, you don't have the resources, but you've got to make the splash in the marketplace. So you need a hero salesperson, you need hero marketing people, you need hero operational people that can produce. And you need that everyone to be rock stars, if you would, to get everything moving. So in reality, for small organizations, you want people that can operate very effectively and efficiently in somewhat of a silo, mentality, because that's what's going to get you started. However, as soon as you grow enough that you can't do it all and you need other people to do it, now all of a sudden you don't have those heroes. It's not just the brilliant person that's driving everything. You now depend on people who have to learn it, produce it on a consistent basis. And that's where it starts to get into trouble, where people create those silos. Now, let me give you an example. I was working with the CEO, and his two favorite messages is, I want heroes and I want people to stay to their lane. That's his way of describing it. Stick to your lane, which means basically I'm going to stick to my expertise. I'm going to do whatever my expertise is. I get to be the hero in that. But guess what? As organizations evolve and grow, they create greater interdependence on each other. In other words, the hero tech person, or the technology department is going to impact operations, is going to impact sales, is going to impact HR. It's going to impact finance. You can't make a change without impacting a bunch of other people. So if you're doing it to optimize technology, but you're not thinking of the impact on others, that's where staying in your lane causes major disruption and breakdown, and in many cases, bottlenecks. So, all of a sudden, it's like we can't get approval to move forward unless one person approves it because it's in their lane. That just doesn't work. So in a way, it looks like it's going to be efficient to everyone stay their lane. But as the organization grows, it actually becomes quite inefficient because of all the breakdowns that occur that then you have to fix afterwards.
I think about some people in the organization with excessive pride, hubris, and look at me, I did all this. Oh, really? You did it all? Okay, take away your team. Okay, go ahead. Go make the nuts, make the metal, make the machine, print the course, print the book. Go ahead. It's impossible. Now I've been in sales for a long time back in the corporate days. And I was always impressed when I spoke with a good salesperson. And I would say, how do you do it? What's your thing? And he would always say, it's the people that support me that have helped me become who I am. And I thought that was really cool. That's something to learn from. But it's kind of hard because you want the people to excel. And we may be going off a little bit because I have some questions about teams. Yeah. But perhaps we'll just touch upon that one because you want the people to excel. But again, it's not all about you. It's about the team and everybody working together. So maybe you could just give a little bit because I want to dig more into it. And I have a couple of questions, but I just wanted to kind of get your take on that right now kind of quickly.
Yeah, you want people to excel, but ultimately the excelling at some point becomes, how do I become a good critical business thinker, not a specialist? Because if I can't integrate my specialty into knowing how it's going to impact the business, I can do great things for my specialty and completely derail the organization. And so for me, when I'm working with executives today, it's all about critical business thinking on how well do you understand the whole business, not just your slice of the business, but the entire business. Even a good salesperson has to understand operations and how it's going to, whatever product or service that they're offering is, going to get delivered. Because if they make the promise and they sell it, but it doesn't get delivered, you got an unhappy customer, So it's like, how does all that going to work together? It's when marketing puts on ads without understanding what's selling, that becomes a a miss. So you've got to get beyond whatever it is that your field is to understand what are all the implications across the organization. I mean, I just heard of it yesterday. So marketing is putting out an ad in a retail market that is an item that's already selling off the shelf, and because of supply chain, they can't get enough. But let's have an ad to reduce price to bring people in to go buy it. Like, I'm sorry, that just doesn't make any sense. But guess what? No one in marketing is talking to anyone that's in the retail stores.
Absolutely amazing. And Mark, as you're saying all this, I'm thinking, you're bright, you're intelligent, you're an author, you're a speaker. And I'm thinking, why did you go down this road? It almost sounds like the earlier question where I asked about the vision and how it started to go on teams. And now I want to know, why are you doing what you're doing? What's your purpose in all this?
Yeah. For me, it all comes down to, I hate seeing people frustrated, discouraged, and working hard without being able to be successful. And there was a long time ago, back in literally the early 80s, 83 to be exact, when I kept seeing things, I kept working with leaders in developing them, kept working on improvement efforts, change efforts, and it wasn't sustainable. It just wasn't sustaining. People would do it for, the honeymoon period, where they do it for the week after, the month after, 2 months after, and then all of a sudden people go back to their old ways. And what I discovered was there was a breakdown, and it was consistent. It didn't matter what industry. There was a breakdown in what I refer to as that cross-functional shared teamwork. Like, people were always doing what was comfortable for them at the expense of what was good for the organization. And they just never had a sense of how to be a team in organization. Everyone was a functional specialist, expert. And everyone looked at their role as, my job is to drive excellence in my department. Well, no, your job is to drive excellence in support of the organization's success, not your functional success. And that switch in mindset was to me the biggest factor. And the reason for that is every breakdown that we saw in organizations had something to do with the breakdown in teamwork. Now, we would call it something else. Oh, it's a breakdown in communication. It's a breakdown in coordination. Oh, we didn't plan it well. Oh, we had a problem, but we didn't solve it effectively. Yeah, but if you look under that very surface, conclusion, what you're going to find is, oh, we never got the right people in the room together. Oh, we didn't include people in the communication. Oh, we didn't get people's ideas about what the impact would be with our solution. We just went driving our solution. Yeah. So what you had was, missteps, breakdowns, and everyone's frustrated because everyone's working super hard to produce their results. But there's nothing more frustrating than, I'm going to produce this, I'm going to work extra hours, I'm going to work on the weekends, only to find that the next department over that needs to take what you did and produce the result doesn't come through. Or you're working hard on a project and senior management is in fact holding you accountable to a schedule, but when you ask them for information, they're not ready to share it yet, and you can't move on without getting that information, but you're the one accountable for meeting the deadline. I mean, we literally are putting people in lose-lose situations, even though we're asking them to work extra hours, extra hard on weekends, at nights to produce results, but they can't produce it alone. They depend on upper management, another department, and there is the failure right there. And for me, that's so demoralizing, especially when it doesn't have to be that way. And as soon as you switch it, I literally watch people thrive, burnout come down, but we're actually accomplishing 50% more, 100% more than we did before, but it's not because of hard work. It's because, oh, we're not having to waste time dealing with all the breakdowns that we used to have from our miscoordination.
We're talking about Old Rules to Break with Mark Samuel, and you can find him at bstate.com. Now that's the letter B and then the word state, STATE.com, bstate.com. Now I want everyone to do this exercise with me, and I don't know the answer, but I'm thinking as soon as I see that bstate.com, I'd like to know what you think, but here's what I think. Mark, don't give it away yet. When I think of why would you call a website B State, and I'm thinking, well, when I'm going to a journey, a destination anywhere, it's like I'm going to destination B, A to B, even though there's routes and you're stopping at a destination, you stop at a motel, you go here, you go there, you fly. So I'm going to say that your website is because that's where we want to be. We want to get to B. I want my 7 digits now. I want to go to B State. So tell me, am I right or am I wrong?
You're absolutely right. I think that was a brilliant way to think about it. And it's so true. We never want to get stuck in our A state. And we certainly don't want to get stuck in just continuous improvement to go from a better A state, like an A+ state. We actually need to, at times, change our paradigm, change our mindsets to create what we refer to as breakthrough results. So for us, it's not just going from A to B, it's going to a B that's actually going to create a breakthrough in our performance, in the morale of our organization, in the service to our customers, like literally be game-changing breakthroughs. And not have to take years to do it. Like we're talking about taking months to create a breakthrough change. Just to give you an example, there's again an organization that has been decentralized, and now they've grown to the point where they can't be decentralized, but they needed that at the beginning, like we talked about before, heroes that create great results. But now that they're growing, they need greater consistency, they need standardization, they need to prevent risk, they need to abide by government regulatory standards. So now they're looking for consistency. So they brought in a merchandising group to now create consistency and standardization, centralization, but with 2 to 3 years of resistance from the directors of each of the business units because they got to be kings and queens of their own area. Now you're asking me to give up that so that we can have standardization. I don't want to have anything of it. So yeah, they might even agree, but then they make exceptions and all that kind of stuff. In a day and a half, I had a day and a half with them just earlier last week and said, okay, let's change the game. Let's elevate you. Instead of being responsible for your business unit, you're actually responsible for the whole business. And all of you together as a team are going to drive centralization in a way that makes sense to support your stores being better, but also support the growth of the organization. And literally half a day, they're all the most resistant people are going, wow, that's exciting. That's a whole new role for me. So instead of being pushed into it, we said, let's create it the other way. Let's have them create it. Let's them be the accountable ones for it, instead of it being the organization making them do it. No, I said, no, you guys just do it. Take the lead. And the whole next day we spent literally setting up the entire plan and operation for making that happen with everybody's excitement and enthusiasm and alignment. So how long does it take to create a true culture change if you know how to work with a team effectively? Sometimes just one day, and the whole game changes. Now, that doesn't necessarily sustain it. We'll see what happens, but at least they've made the shift with the enthusiasm and excitement, and literally people thanking me afterwards for moving to a model of the business that they were resisting for 2 to 3 years. Now, that to me is breakthrough results.
Mark, we're going to talk about some more old rules to break. And I got something really cool for you for our audio podcast listeners. I've got a picture of Mark's book, Anytime, showing up right there, Reimagine Teams. And again, the tagline is the missing piece in team building to achieve breakthrough results. There's the book, and you can find it at that bstate.com. That's an easy place. And I'm just looking through it, and there's some old rules that need to be broken. You've mentioned some, we've talked about some, and you could just say really fast, number one, I just said blah, blah, or whatever. But let's go into what are the 6 old rules. They're old. We don't want them anymore. That we got to break them. Over to you, Mark. Tell us.
Well, the first rule that needs to just change is you cannot build a team off the field. Now, what do I mean by that? It's like I don't create a baseball team in a planning dinner together, or okay, let's do a ropes course together, or let's do some trust exercises together. I never once was on any sports team or music group that started by building the team, focusing on relationships off the field. We were either in the rehearsal hall, or we were, in my earliest days in the garage playing music, but I was always on a baseball field. That's where we built the team. You built the team based on execution, not on relationships. That's the biggest mindset change that we all have to make. And all the team building, even when I learned team building and when I started off doing team building from my graduate studies, was all based on, well, first you got to build trust and you have to have good relationships. Well, the problem with that is there's relationship trust and there's execution trust. And you can be good friends and have good relationship trust and not have execution trust. What is execution trust? Is based on credibility. And credibility gets established by doing what you say you're going to do, meeting expectations, communicating when there's a problem. And you can have great relationship trust, but if the execution trust isn't there, it doesn't mean anything. But where does execution trust come from? Agreements on what's expected of each other. How are we going to show up when there's a problem? How do we include each other? And it's all about the execution is what creates teams. And what ultimately creates team relationships is being able to depend on our teammates for executing the way we all thought would be the optimal way to execute.
All right. We're going to run through these now. Number 2, old rule to break about team. We don't want this rule anymore. Break it.
Yeah, it's that all teams get built in the same way, in the same order. It's not true. Different teams are at different levels with different purposes. So if I'm on a team where we all have the same, let's say it's at the individual contributor level, and we're all here on the manufacturing floor and we're all having to produce a product. Well, we all need to be supporting each other and challenging each other. When someone's breaking a safety commitment, we got to point that out so this person doesn't get hurt. If someone's learning something new on the line, then I'm there to help support that person. We have to give feedback, and that's really important. If I'm on a leadership team and we all have different functional areas, I don't want you necessarily in my functional area giving advice, nor should that be expected. It's a different role and different levels of complication. So in some organizations, we start by just sharing, where do we want to be in a year? But for other groups that are just forming, they can't think about 6 months from now or a year from now. They need to think in terms of, what do we need to function just to survive in day to day? And it's the one thing I had to learn, because I had my one approach to building teams. And I thought, wow, this just doesn't work when it's a new team versus an existing team. Or how do you build a team that is in multiple countries and they don't get together? It's just like, wait a minute, They're in different time zones. Oh, we can bring them all together, but that's not reflecting their reality. So you can create great agreements when we're all together. As soon as you scatter into different time zones, now how do you do cross-functional problem solving or decision making? They're not there. You have to build the team on the field that they're actually going to play in, and you have to adjust your approach to the teams based on where they are, not based on your methodology.
All teams are not built the same way. I like that. All right. This is getting good. Well, good. This is getting gooder. Okay, that's not good at grammar, but
right.
But you'll all remember that now because I said it. It is getting gooder. That's going to be my new tagline. Okay, number 3.
Oh, this is a huge one. And it's one that's bothered me for such a long time. Over the years, when I first got into doing team building back in the 80s, the ideal size of a team was 8 to 12. And then it sort of went up in the 90s to 2000s to, okay, now we could deal with 15. And now if you go to any of the experts, and boy, there's experts, man, they all say they're either the agile experts or the lean experts or the whatever experts. Now it's 25. You can't have a team larger than 25. And I always said one thing about that. Is that because of the team, or is that the limitation of the facilitator trying to develop the team?
By the way, quick aside, when I grew up in corporate America, does that even make sense? I grew up in corporate America. The maximum amount of team was 5, and then any of those people would have to have, but nobody could get more than 5, and that was considered the ideal group.
Right, exactly. So in reality, you don't form a team based on the perfect number. You form a team based on where is their need for interdependence and working together. And just to give you an idea, we do a lot with middle management teams, which in most organizations aren't even thought of as a team, which is why they're so dispensable. Because anytime you have a middle manager making decisions, that they're automatically siloed because they're not part of a team where they get to learn about the impact of their decisions and solving of problems on other areas. So of course that's not going to work. I even see, I was literally working with an organization, a pharmaceutical, that literally has a tier system, and they skip middle management and go right to senior level. Here's a problem, now let's move it up to senior. And middle management has no say as a team on how to solve it. So it's like, of course they're, minimized in terms of effectiveness. But I have to tell you, in one organization, just to give an example, and I can give you many, both manufacturing, healthcare, medical centers, et cetera, that middle management group is the key to really getting change happening fast, because senior management's too far, and middle management is the one that actually drives operations. So we put them together. We had 65 people in the room together. Now, do we make all decisions?
Broke the rule of teams.
That's right, broke the rule of teams. But
where's my 25?
That's right. But we were having making a very major change effort that was across all these middle management areas and project leaders. We included them in it as well. And we brought them all together. Now, does that mean that they're making every decision together? No. Does that mean they're solving all problems with 65 people? No. Does that mean, though, that within that 65, we want them operating the same way, executing the same way, including each other in the same way? Yes. So they're still going to work in sub-teams and report to the larger team. But I have to say, their project was to make a major organizational change that was estimated to take 1.5 years. They completed it in 9 months.
Bravo.
Now, why was that? Well, wait a minute. Teams is going to slow it down. Too many people create confusion. No, not if you know how to structure it well. And get everyone purposeful. What's that?
I said, not if they read your book.
That's right. Not if they read my book. I mean, that was the whole point of it, was getting, how do we understand how each other is affected? Relationships improved, morale improved, and performance improved costs went completely down. Like they saved millions of dollars because they removed all the duplication of effort that was happening before that nobody even knew about because they were all separated. Now, I have to say, this is a worldwide team. So you had people coming from North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and those were the main continents that were being represented. So yeah, we had to get everybody together, creating agreements around how we're going to support, connect, communicate, plan in an efficient way, given that level of breadth for the organization. But that's happening more today, not less.
Very insightful. And if anyone's keeping track, where are we? 3 out of 6. So now we're going to number 4 of 6 old rules to break. Number 4, please.
Yeah, you can't build a team in an event. No event. Yeah, like event. Like, oh, let's have a team building, 2-day team building offsite, and we're all going to get everybody together, and we're going to all feel really good at the end, and we're going to make these agreements and action plans and do these assessments and feel really good. Teams evolve over time. So yes, you can get it started in an event, but you have to do the follow-up afterwards to see how does it need to morph. It's like, can you build a baseball team in one practice? No, you have to practice, go to a game, modify in the next practice, see how they perform, modify in the next. Same with the musician team, same with the dancing group. It's like you can't build it all at once and expect it to stay the same. They evolve. And I've had teams that actually performed super well, but they needed to go to another level. And you got to treat that differently and take them to another level. It's like even trust changes over time. At first, we have one level of trust to get by, then we get a deeper level of trust, and then we get a deeper level of trust. Well, great. How does that going to change your execution? So everything is about how we execute, and no team stays the same over time. New constraints, new people, new situation, old people that change their habits, that you have to now adjust.
I like that. Teams evolve. And if you want to be successful, you have to help them evolve and evolve with them. All right. Number 5 of old rules about teams that need to be broken. Let's break this one.
Oh, this is a big one too, because what most people think is team accountability and team ownership means nobody's accountable and nobody has ownership. So that's why we're always thinking of, let's delegate it to the one person and they'll just bring people together to make it happen. No, team accountability and team ownership, shared ownership is what we call it, is the key to fast results. And why is that? Because ownership does not mean making every decision. Ownership does not mean I have to be involved and approve everything that's being done. Ownership means I have a stake in making sure this project or you as the leader of this project is successful. That's the ownership. If you're not successful, I'm not successful. Therefore, what my job is in having ownership is helping to solve any obstacle or breakdown that's going to prevent success. Now, if I talk to a leadership team, I don't want them to say, these are the 3 priorities. Now let's delegate those out and now it's hands off. Because how many times is whoever's delegated to is trying to implement their project, but don't get the support of the other leaders? That happens all the time. Why don't they support it? Because they've got their own priorities. And if I take time to support you, then I'm not getting my thing done. Or you hit me by surprise needing something that I don't have the resources to do. So I'm either going to support you and not get my thing done, or I'm not going to support you and be blamed as not a good team player. What we do in this case is say, no. Whatever breakdown on those top priorities, not everything, but the very top priorities, shared ownership. We all will help to solve the problem. And guess who's going to solve the problem more often than anybody? The one not involved in it. because those involved in it have lost their objectivity. They're not creative. They're not innovative. They're stuck in whatever paradigm they're in. So oftentimes it's the person not involved that actually says, well, wait, have you thought about doing it this way? Have you thought about doing it that way? And now all of a sudden you get fresh ideas. Most times now, if I'm not involved, well, that's when I look at my email in the meeting.
You know, Mark, this sounds similar to, but different from the one breaking on the hero, where the person is just all about doing himself. This
That's
really pushes that guy out. It's similar, but it's kind of like just right side by side on that. It's very interesting. Okay, now number 6. Okay, everyone in the audience, let's do a little drum roll. Well, we have more questions, so it's not the end of the questions, just the end of the 6 rules. What you got for me, Mark?
This was my rule.
Oh,
I'm breaking my own rule. And you have to understand, many of these rules started out as my rules until I discovered that they weren't actually practical. And this one was a big one. I had major resistance in thinking that any team could be built without getting all the players in one room together in person. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hit. And I had these assignments, many of which said, no, we're not building the team now because we can't get everybody in because we can't travel and we can't be in the same room together, literally can't be in the same room together. So now what do? Well, I had to adjust my thinking to say, how do we build a team remotely? How do we build a team using the virtual formats like Zoom or MS Teams or some other format? How do we actually do that? And literally it took us 3.5 months.
wow.
And I had 10 people working on it, refining, trying it, refining, trying it, refining it until we found that we could actually get the same measurable results that we were getting before, but it was all done virtually. We improved relationships, we improved execution, and we achieved team outcomes in a measurable way that equated to when we had people in a room together. Now, are there still advantages to having people in a room together? Yeah, it feels better, but it's not a showstopper by any stretch. And there's even some ways in which a virtual mode makes it safer for people than in person. Because as soon as you have that dominant personality and that ego-driven person in person, they can really dominate a group much easier than when you're online and everyone has the same size box.
I never thought about that. You're so right. It's been a while since I've been in corporate America, but yeah, back then there were people sometimes you had to watch what you said or watch what you say, both.
Yeah.
But yeah, if everyone's a box, it kind of does change the dynamics, doesn't it?
Yes. So that was my rule that I had to break. Otherwise, I would have gone out of business.
You evolved. You evolved. You just didn't stop, just as you said in some of the other rules that you have to break. Very good. Very good. Now we were talking about don't do this and don't do that and don't do this.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk about do this and do this. We're going to talk about team competencies that you just no one really teaches them today. I think you've got 3 of them in your book. Let's see if we can get through some of those.
Yeah, I'll tell you, these 3 are so critical. One thing that is absolutely fundamental for any team is getting out of the mode of waiting for it to be a perfect solution before you take action. In this world today, it's so important to act and learn from experience and adjust than it is to theorize everybody's opinion about what's going to happen when we act, thinking that we have to find the best solution. It just doesn't work that way. Most of us learn today based on experience, and we're all now pioneers in the world that we live in.
Mark, I call that being Italian. When I first started podcasting, all I did was read whatever I could find on the internet, and from start to within 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. It didn't take long. I just read a whole bunch of stuff, and I didn't read it 8 hours a day. I just read it amongst other stuff, like I did my own little self-course. And I started live. Like, what are you, crazy? I started live, an hour show, never podcasted, never did radio, but I just did it. I call that being Italian. I made so many mistakes, but here we are. We just busted 30 million all-time views and listens and downloads in
Wow.
my 6.5 years. And I still make a few mistakes, but you just gotta, as the old days, we called it just wing it.
Yes.
And nobody teaches that anymore, huh?
No one teaches that. And there is somewhat the agile methodologies, but they're applied at the lowest levels rather than the highest levels. And in my viewpoint, first of all, the key is taking action, because until you experience it, you don't know the truth of it. The truth gets revealed in the action. And here's what I've discovered. Action creates movement. When we're worried about taking the right action, then it creates repetition, because we take an action, then we go back to the beginning, try it again. Go back to the beginning and try it again. And we now are feeling stuck, worried, fearful, etc. But if you take action and just adjust and keep going, and take another action, adjust and keep going, it turns into movement where now all of a sudden there's a flow to what we're doing. That's not the goal. It's really nice, and organizations will feel a lot better when they're in flow, but the ultimate is going into momentum. In momentum, you're so aligned and you've got so much synergy. For every step you take of effort, you end up going 3 steps. It exactly models a runner. When a runner is on the blocks in a sprint, their first few steps, they have to work super hard to create enough inertia just to move 2 or 3 steps. Once they've gone off that 2 or 3, and it's the hardest, which is why people get so critical in those stages, they want to give up. It's like, oh, this is too hard. But no, you got to keep going. Then you go into a flow. But ultimately, towards the end of the race, every runner is in momentum. Where, how do you know someone's in momentum? They can't stop. They actually have to slow themselves down to stop. Because if you stop on a dime, you'll hurt yourself. It's called crashing. So the idea is you want to create such momentum that it's no longer effortful to accomplish your projects. That doesn't mean you're not putting effort into it, but what it means is you're taking out the struggle, because everyone's working in concert with each other, and it starts to be a dance within the organization that just things happen magically. Literally, we watch organizations accomplish 2 or 3 times what they were able to do because they're now aligned. They all have the same purpose. They have the same habits. They're not running up against each other in ego battles and political battles and poor handoffs. That's what we want to do. But it all starts, you got to take the action. You can't wait to take the perfect action. You just got to act, learn, and adjust. Key.
Very much so. I love it. Mark, we have just about a minute or so. Can we have the other one in a little condensed version?
Well, yes. So this one is literally the most important. It's actually the most important for accountability and the most important for teamwork. It's proactive recovery, which drives cooperation and speed, because instead of having to get it perfect, we get it imperfect, identify what might break down, and we already talk about ahead of time how we're all going to work together to correct it. This is every baseball team I played on, every basketball team I played on, every music group I played in. We always talked about what do we do when something breaks down, and we practiced that. Everybody knew how we were going to all shift and move into different positions based on a breakdown. And it wasn't a plan B. It was just simply a response to human error of one sort or another, or things that we couldn't anticipate, all knowing how we're going to coordinate. If you implement proactive recovery, I promise you, you will cut off literally 20, 25% on your projects just from the breakdowns that aren't coordinated ahead of time. And again, I don't mean risk mitigation. That's a different thing. This is just simply any human error that could take place. That is a key.
Mark, I just kind of want to get that in my head. So we're sitting here at the conference table and we're saying, not that it's going to go wrong, but what happens if blah, 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 this occurs with our supplier? What would we do? But not necessarily having contingencies all worked out, but just getting people able to think, to move, to dance to a different tune
Yes.
if something happens.
Yeah, it might even just be which people do we get in a room to take whatever's taken place to problem solve it together with cooperation. And literally, I wish we had more time. I give you an example of it where literally in a hospital, we had a nursing unit move from one floor to another. It didn't work. They had to move back down. They had to make different proposals, do a whole different scheme, then move back up. When we asked people in the medical field, how long do you think that would take in a hospital to get all the approvals and get senior management and make the different things? They all say 6 months to a year. It was done in 30 days. Why? Everybody was prepared. That's right. You break the rules.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Absolutely love it. Once again, we talked about old rules to break with Mark Samuel, and you can find him at bestate.com. Mark, this was great. We're going to chat more, and you're welcome to join us on the various platforms where we are in the video, and and engage there. And I just want to thank you so much. This has been very, very good. Some of it I remember. I actually kind of zone out. I'm going back in my corporate days, and then I've got to come back. Oh, we're actually talking, because it's your fault. Because I just kind of there's some really interesting stuff here. Just really loved it. I just want to thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Tony, for having me and for really having the guts to say, let's go after those broken rules, because those are the things that are sacred cows to most people in team building. So we're hitting it right up front. So thank you for that.
I love breaking rules.
Yeah.
That's our new slogan. Mark, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tony.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with me while I featured an elite entrepreneur who took his vision to reality. We discussed old rules to break with Mark Samuel. That was a blast. Let's break some rules. We talked about the 6 old rules about teams that need breaking. And we talked about 3 team competencies that no one teaches. So what do you think? Which one resonated the most with you? Any aha moments? Let me know. And please remember supporting the show with a nice review on Apple Podcasts, as well as comments on the video platforms. It really helps us grow. We want to help people, so your involvement, your sharing, your engagement really helps us. So if you want to help us grow and help you grow, please do so. And share this with a few friends to help them too. It's all about friends helping friends. All right? Use this and let's help you move on your journey to success. Thanks, and remember, everyone, just take action. Success awaits those who persevere and remain steadfast despite the odds. Sow good seeds, do good deeds, and join me on the next episode of The Tony DUrso Show.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's edition of the Tony DUrso Show with his key influencers. Be sure to tune in again next Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Influencers channel.